Ladies and gentlemen, I am a hopeless potato. I realized something the other day, which is that Wargaming placed 4 ships into the store. If you go to the store, you go to the ships tab, you look for ships for test. At the very end of the menus on the tab, you'll find 4 new vessels that you can rent for a period of 7 days if you pay 1,000 doubloons for each. There's 2 American cruisers, the Anchorage and the Vallejo, which respectively look like a weird Alaska and Worcester kind of copy paste thing, but are probably very different. We've also got a Japanese battleship called the Heisen with 12 16-inch guns. And then finally, we've got this thing, a British heavy cruiser, HMS Hampshire at Tier 7. This thing well, to be fair, I've only played the Hampshire and the Heisen. I have not rented the Vallejo or the Anchorage. So long as they're available this week, I might end up doing that. It seems that the day you click the button to make the rental is the day when the 7 day time period starts. So presumably, if I rented either the Anchorage or Vallejo today, I'd have all week to play it. And maybe I will, but I've been too caught up playing this thing, the Hampshire, and I can tell you right off the bat that I hope they put this thing in the game soon. This is a very interesting cruiser for a number of reasons. We're not going to go too in depth on the stats and all that stuff since this is sort of a first impressions thing. And these ships are, of course, in a quote unquote testing state. It's entirely possible that when and if they do come to this game, some of the parameters will be changed. So there's no real reason to get into all the nitty gritty details right here. But what I can tell you about HMS Hampshire is that number one, it is armed with 10 203mm guns. These are 8-inch guns, typical heavy cruiser caliber. They reload in about 9 seconds, and none of these numbers so far are unique when it comes to Tier 7 cruisers. We've got plenty of them which have 203mm guns and reload in 9 seconds or less. For example, the Wichita has 203mm guns, and its reload is very quick. The difference here is that the Hampshire can only shoot armor piercing out of its main battery guns. It does not get access to HE. So, unlike the other British heavy cruisers of the Tech Tree line, which do get access to HE, this thing is much more like the British light cruisers. And also like the British light cruisers, it enjoys improved penetration angles, except I think they've buffed these penetration angles to heretofore unseen heights. They're absolutely insane. I don't know exactly what the angle of ricochet is, but Metajerk, another community contributor, I think he told me it was like they start ricocheting at an 85 or 90 degree angle, which is comparable to SAP. Basically, there aren't too many angles where these things will ricochet. You see there, we do get 3 ricochets against the Amagi. We also get a shatter. That shatter means our armor piercing shell would have penetrated that part of the armor if it was thinner, which is kind of crazy. And as the Amagi, draws in closer and we dial in the aim more toward his superstructure or the lighter parts of his ship that we can actually penetrate, you can see we don't get quite as many shatters or ricochets. We get some armor piercing penetrations, and they do not hit for light damage, I'll tell you that. And, well, the against cruisers, we'll see that coming up here soon, but against cruisers, these AP angles are sort of like if you're playing the Des Moines. If some cruiser gives you a little bit too much broadside, your AP is just going to rip right into the Citadel. Same story with HMS Hampshire, except it's even more extreme, if you can believe it. The thing also does get some torpedoes. It's only got 4 of them on either side, and since it's British, it can single fire launch them, which is cool. But at the same time, even though the cruiser does get such fantastic AP, you saw we citadeled that New Orleans out there. That's another thing. This AP seems to maintain great penetration even against battleships at maximum range. I think we'll have a few examples of that in this game. But even with that great AP, there are, of course, some downsides. I suspect this thing is going to be somewhat of a challenge for people to play because while it does have heavy guns, large caliber guns, 203 millimeters, that's where it gets the designation of heavy cruiser from. It doesn't have heavy armor. The bow and the stern have 25 millimeter plating, which can be overmatched by practically every battleship you will encounter at Tier 7, Tier 6, and of course Tier 8 when you're playing this thing, so you can expect to be overmatched right through the nose and the stern. The side plating is big enough to bounce some battleship caliber guns, but it does have a pretty exposed citadel, although it's only exposed near sort of the rear of the ship. It's a very weird looking citadel. We'll probably go over it once the ship has been fully released, but the part where the ship seems to become a little bit challenging is that you'll note the front two turrets are 360-degree rotating turrets. None of the rest of them are. And what that effectively means is that if you are in a kiting position, it's easy to switch four of the turrets from one side to the other. The one turret in the front is not 360, but the other two are. So if you're kiting, you can go from port to starboard, starboard to port, etc. very quickly. Not the same thing when you're pushing in, but that does seem to suggest that maybe this ship would do well as a little bit of a kiting ship, and it certainly does, or it can anyway. The rudder shift is also responsive, and that allows you to dodge a fair bit of incoming fire, so you've got some agility. But the problem is, if you look at the back of the ship, the super firing turret in the rear is sitting on one of those sort of step shapes on, a sort of squared off barbette or something like that. And that flat walling that turret is sitting on top of is very, very good for catching and arming shells. So it can be very risky when you're kiting away. You can take an awful lot of damage. But here we'll get some target practice against the Lexington. And by the way, this game, I think I've probably said it in the title or thumbnail, it becomes really tense up until this point. It's actually quite close if you just look at the ship count. The cap situation is another story, but the Lexington is making a crucial error. I don't know if he was trying to pull up to get closer, to reduce the amount of time it takes his planes to get to the enemy, but he sailed right into spotting range and he's giving me broadside. We're able to farm him quite effectively as he goes, and our goal is to make sure he sinks before he gets out of line of sight, because if we can, then that's a huge bonus to our team. You can see the enemy team is actually gaining on points very quickly, but we are able to take out the CV, and ours is still left alive, sort of tucked in the corner of the map, very far away from any of the reds. No chance of him being spotted at all, so now we have a massive tactical advantage. We did not have any destroyers in this game, which is a little bit of a problem because this thing is so poorly armored. It really does require spotting from its teammates in order to perform well. And if we don't have destroyers, then we have to spot with our face, which is a recipe for disaster, unless, of course, we've got aircraft carriers that can spot for us. But of course, the problem with aircraft carriers spotting for us is that the red CVs can spot us for the enemy. And that's what's happening here. Even though the Lexington is dead, he is doing his damnedest to keep me spotted. You see, he's dropped a squadron of fighter planes, and he's got like 3 of his teammates right in front of me. Some cruisers spamming HE, which is a huge problem because when they do light me on fire, it increases my detectability by sea even more. This thing, by the way, is very stealthy. I think it's got a 9.6 kilometer detectability by sea, which is excellent, especially with something with guns this big. But when we're on fire, you can see our concealment blooms out to 11.6 kilometers. And right now, we're not shooting our guns. We want the fire to go out so that hopefully we can go dark. The plane is still spotting us, but we've lost a lot of HP. And we don't dare turn and try to expose broadside to the Roma because he will absolutely demolish us. Although it looks like there's maybe one plane left in the CV squadron, which you can see he's not happy that we killed him. He's hanging around here even after death, trying to influence the game by spotting us so his teammates can kill us. And at this point, we really got to get out of here. I'm sort of sailing into them to try to get the AA to shoot them down. We're able to take down the fighters, but the actual bombers, well, the CV doesn't want to get that close, but we do momentarily go unspotted for a moment. The Riga has been shooting HE this entire time, so it was sort of a calculated risk to turn here, hoping that I wouldn't be spotted by these planes, and I wasn't. It does look like I'm going to be able to make it out of dodge and at least turn away. Still, not ideal. We've lost all of our HP. 6,860 is all we have left. So you can see how this cruiser can be a bit of a challenge. It can get melted very easily. And if we were to be spotted right now, it's entirely possible that one salvo from this Roma or this Riga would be able to take us out quite easily. So what we need to do is pay attention to what's going on here. The CV on our team is actually paying attention to the game too. He's going to be instrumental in the outcome here. He was asking us to get back earlier on, which if we had died there against that CV, I think we would have lost this game. But we were able to survive. We were just able to eke it out, get away from the CV's last remaining planes, and get far away from these two remaining ships, the Riga and the Roma, so that they aren't that much of a threat to us. Meanwhile, we've got our last two remaining surface ship teammates, a pair of battleships, over there in or by Bravo. Looks like they are going to try to flip it, and if they can, that would be ideal. That would give us a 2-point or a 2-cap advantage. You can see we're far ahead of the enemy team on points at the moment, but that could easily change if either the Riga or the Roma manage to sink either one of those battleships, and to be frank, we haven't really looked at their HP count, so we don't know how likely they are to go down. Riga, meanwhile, we're taking some pot shots at him. We're on the very, very edge of our range, where our goal is if the enemy starts shooting at us, which only the Riga is aiming at us right now, but if they both start shooting, we can hopefully sail forward and get out of line of sight and break it, which we do there. Well, no, actually, I think we just go dark because the smoke firing penalty wore off, so we take a pot shot at the Riga from maximum distance, or rather the Roma. And you can see these shells, much like the other British shells, are very floaty, but there, 6 penetrations against a Roma at, 17 kilometers away? That is not a lightly armored ship, ladies and gentlemen. The Roma and the Italian battleships in general are very heavily armored. I'm sure that a lot of those shells went into his superstructure, so it's not a surprise that they can pen that. But his deck armor, I suspect we probably got some pens there, too. Maybe not, I could be wrong, those could have all been superstructure pens, but if they were some deck armor pens, then holy crap, this thing does not lose a lot of penetration at range. It's absolutely marvelous, honestly. We're still spotted, we go dark. It's one of our battleships is sunk. The other one is sort of posted right up there next to the Bravo cap. He's got no HP left. Roma is almost certainly going to be able to take him out, but Roma himself is on very low health, so we might be able to chime in there and sink him, even if he does sink our battleship teammate. Meanwhile, the CV, I don't know, he is getting maybe a little bit uncomfortably close to these last remaining Reds, the Roma in particular. I think he's still too far away to be spotted, so they don't have a chance of shooting at him. But the Roma is laser focused on our battleship teammate. He's not paying attention to us at all. I think the Riga maybe is. There we get the Confederate medal with that hit against the Roma. And actually, he's almost gone down. He might be on a perma fire, courtesy of our last remaining battleship teammate, which was a Massachusetts. And the Massachusetts doesn't take down the Roma, but instead the CV does, leaving only the Riga. And conceivably, we could still lose this game, but probably not. I think the Riga would need a lot more time than 60 seconds in order to sink me and the friendly CV. He could absolutely do that, but he could absolutely do that if there were more time left to go in this game, but there's simply not. So we are going to win this in a glorious victory, and I hope this gives you some sort of idea of what this AP can do. It is fantastic. I really like it, and I like kind of how this ship is very much a glass cannon. In order to play it well, you do have to be quite conscious of your positioning, and you have to take up good places on the map in order for things to go well. But of course, this AP with its crazy angles, I mean, you can see what it'll do to this Riga as well. Not great results there. But as he gets closer and as he turns just a little bit more, I know we've only got 8 seconds left to go, but this last volley here from the shells, you can see just how many penetrations there are. Almost all penetrations. In fact, we almost sink the Riga. Not quite, but we do win the battle. And so the Hampshire is a very interesting ship. If you've got the 1,000 doubloons to spend to rent it, I highly recommend giving it a test. I hope they bring this thing to the game soon, because I'm going to be sad once they remove it from my port. I would like to play this ship a lot more. It's really interesting. It's very unique in terms of Tier 7 cruisers, and it's potentially very, very strong, but also challenging to play. So I enjoy it immensely. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.